And we're game. I'm going mute.
Okay. Hey, this is Rebecca Hall. Welcome to Digital Learning Day. I'm at CTC at Hull right now, and I'm on a Google Hangout with Mary Williams over at Midlothian High School. Before we start, we just want to make sure you have Google Classroom open so you can post questions there as we're working. So make sure you have Google Classroom open. The class code for that is JFCU3Z. And then we want you to just check in real quick, tell us who you are, what school you teach at, what you teach, if you're watching with a group of people, who you're watching with. Also want to make sure that you have student.desmos.com open in another window because we're going to use that for the second half of the PD session. And then I'm going to Mary. Okay, Mary, you ready?
Yes.
Okay.
Hi, my name is Mary Williams, and I teach Algebra 2 and AFDA here at Midlothian High School, and I'm a huge Desmos fan. I'm excited to share some of the things that you can do in Desmos and ways that you can use it to engage your students. So as you may have seen in some of our other Digital Learning Day sessions, Desmos has grown into a platform with many different applications for teaching math. Students can use Desmos in their browser on their Chromebooks, even if they are not connected to the internet. So as long as the student has it open on their desktop, in their browser, then even if they don't have access to internet at home, they can still use Desmos. And it works really well as a graphing calculator. At the heart of Desmos is the online graphing calculator tool. So we're gonna start with that. So this is the Desmos home screen. When you go to desmos.com, this is the screen that's going to pop up on your computer. This is going to be a little different than what you're going to see later on when you're using Activity Builder, but this is the tool that started it all. You can use this as a graphing calculator, and it's so easy to graph. If you start over here, you can type in your equation, like y equals 2/3 x plus 1, and you can see your line. Unlike the TI-84, you don't have to have it put into slope-intercept form. I could simply type in 3x plus 2y equals 4 and get a line that way. And I really like how easily Desmos handles fractions. You could type it in pretty much in any format. And if you want a fraction, you just type the division button, and now you have a fraction that easily pops up. And since you can type these equations in any form, it's a great way for students to play around with converting back and forth between slope-intercept form and standard form. And it's also great when you're in Algebra 2 working with transformations of quadratics. So speaking of quadratics, Desmos has some pre-made graphs that are easy to use. So if you come over here onto the left-hand side, there's these 3 bars, and you can use any one of these and just easily bring it right over onto your screen. So for example, if I wanted to work with a parabola, I could just click on this and open graph, and there would be my parabola. There are trig graphs, calculus graphs. There's something for everybody here. Some conics. The transformations are awesome. So we're going to go back and just play a little bit more on our own to see some of the things that Desmos can do. So I'm going to go back over here and close out the ones that I had. You just simply press the X to eliminate that. So we talked about typing in an equation like y equals 2x plus 1. One of the most powerful things that you can do in Desmos is let kids play around with sliders so they can get a better understanding of slope and y-intercept. So instead of putting in the values for slope and y-intercept, I'm going to use the variables m for slope and b for y-intercept. And if you click on one of these gray buttons here, it's going to add the slider. So you're going to get a line that you can move. So I can say, okay, kids, what happens with your graph when your slope increases? So right now the slope is set to m equals 1. So if I build that forward, you can see that the slope is getting steeper and steeper. Okay, well, what happens when my slope goes negative? Oh, okay, now I can see it's changed the direction. You can also animate, and if you look over here, there's a little gray triangle. When you press that, it'll animate. You can adjust the speed, and you can adjust the range for that as well. If you're ready to stop having that animate for you, just click it again to pause it. And you could also use your slider for the y-intercept. So kids can play around with and see how their graph changes as the y-intercept changes. And again, you could use your animation tool for that as well. And you can have them both going at the same time. So as you can imagine, kids have a really fun time with this, being able to animate a bunch of different lines. Personally, I think being able to visually see this effect of changing a variable is one of the most effective ways to use Desmos. You could also use it rather than for linear, you could talk about absolute value. So I'm going to go type in absolute value equation. And I'm going to activate all of my sliders. So this is a huge Algebra 2 concept where students understand what the transformations are. So if we play around what happens with my A value when that's negative, now I can see that that's decreased here. What happens when my A value is really large or really small with regard to the stretch and shrink or with the compression? How does changing the H value affect my graph? And how about the K value? And there are activity builders that are already set, that are already created, that explore these transformations of graphs. I think that's extremely powerful. If we go back to our original function where we were working with the line, where we had y equals 2x plus 1, you can see that there's no limitation for domain and range. And when I started using Desmos for teaching domain and range, there was definitely a change in my students' ability to understand how much impact it would have if you limited your domain and your range. So if I wanted my domain to be limited from -2 to +2, you simply type that in here. -2 is less than x, which is less than 2, and it's going to chop off. It's going to take that line and show it with that restricted domain. I could do the same thing with range. So for example, if I had, let's say, a parabola, I said, well, I want to restrict my range. I would use a y instead, and then I would be able to see just that piece of the parabola. Now, there are all kinds of Desmos activities that are out there built for you already where kids can create different artwork. And here's an example of one of my students did a few years ago using OLAF. So she just used a bunch of different equations to actually create that graph. So some of our Algebra 2 teachers here at Midlothian like to have the kids write their names using the graphs. They feel like that's a little bit easier to make sure the kids aren't just copying something they might find online. So they use parabolas and absolute value, square root graphs, or lines to write their name. And that's been a pretty popular way to integrate Desmos. Desmos can also be used for solving a system of equations. So if students type in, say, 2 lines, they can see where these 2 lines are going to cross. That one would be parallel. Let's do one that's not. And then they can change down here and they can check to see what is their one solution to that system of equations. It also helps them to really understand why lines that have the same slope are parallel, because they can see those 2 equations line up right next to each other. Desmos is also great for working with inequalities. All you have to do is, instead of typing in an equal sign, you would have an inequality there. So, and it's going to shade for you. And there are also options for using the greater than or equal to, or less than or equal to. We did an example with Chick-fil-A where students had to figure out how much money that they had to spend and how many chicken nuggets and how much drinks they could get. And it was a really great way for them to understand that the overlapping piece was going to be where the system of equalities, that was going to be where all my solutions are. So for example, if I had another inequality in here, then students would be able to see that this is going to be the shaded area where these 2 overlap. And you can also change the colors. Students like to play around with them and change the different colors to see the overlapping there. Desmos is fantastic for this, and it's also great with using the activity builder. So with the activity builder, you go to teacher.desmos.com and look for the different tools that are out there. And I can show you an example of one of those. So this is going to be the activity builder that you're going to be working with today. So instead of it just taking you to your regular Desmos graphing calculator screen, you're going to go to a activity builder screen. Okay, and I think that is all I really had to show you using the graphing calculator screen. So I'm going to turn it back over to Rebecca. Turn off my screen share.
Hey, so we hope that you learned a lot from Mary and got to see a little bit about the Desmos calculator and the sliders. And now we're going to look at the activity builder. So you are going to play the role of a student. So we need you to go to student.desmos.com. Pull the code up for you. Okay, and then you can click continue without signing in, and then the class code is W4XBB. And then you're just going to work through the activity like Mary just showed you. And that both Mary and I will be in Google Classroom. So if you have any questions, you can post questions there. Mary is going to take a couple screenshots because she can see on the teacher side what it is you're doing as you're working as a student. So she'll take some screenshots of that and post those in Classroom so you can get an idea of what the teacher view looks like while students are working. And then, of course, if you have any questions, just email us, post them on Classroom. And thank you for joining us today. Thank you for participating. We hope that you learned something new. Okay.
All right. So at this point, what I would do is I'd hit stop broadcast. But when you sign off, I'm gonna end the broadcast right there. So